So when you really get down to what you're made out of, the total electronic, the total state of you is on the point of a pin. James S. McDonald actually had an institute to study paranormal psychology. That's why his airplanes were named Banshee and Phantom. He was an Irishman who was Scotsman, very much interested in the spiritual world and the paranormal. And he had part of his research department working with a foundation he had to study the paranormal. And the great Randy, the magician, infiltrated his organization and actually for about 6 months did sleight of hand experiments to get him tied to this, that there was something really there, and then he discredited him. The head of the research department would not even talk about anything related to this. In fact, the guy in Ann Arbor that had the zero-point energy machine actually came to McDonnell-Douglas. He and a couple of his partners came in. They were going to talk about this funny hydrogen motor that they had. And I got invited to the meeting. And about halfway through it, I just said, guys, you've got a zero-point energy machine. Why don't you admit it? And the head of the research department, who he thinks, quote, was discredited, was put off when they did, Randy did this, had the guards come in and escort them off the plant, because he was just so terrified of this. He thought it was pseudoscience. And I said, it's not pseudoscience, it's just beyond what we know right now. But anyway, Randy would always say, I can't measure it. And what I would say is, I'm going to give him a ruler, and I'm going to say, now I want you to measure the diameter of an atom, or I want you to measure, what's the distance between quarks, and the answer is, well, that device isn't useful for doing that. So when he talks about radio instruments and electrodes and probes and says, well, I can't measure anything parapsychological, he may not know what is parapsychology. How do you measure it? The only people that I know that have come close are the Russians and their parapsychology institutes, most of which are all now defunct. But they had some very interesting twins that they were doing experiments with, that they could find ways that they were measuring something was occurring between the two of them in their brains, so they could actually know what the other one was thinking. And it's utterly amazing as to the spectrum of electromagnetics that are going on inside the brain. The Russians have done a lot with what's called scalar waves and different spectrum electromagnetics within the brain, and they're convinced that you could explain parapsychology if you could ever find out what it is that you have to measure to prove that it's occurring. But they just got to the edge of perhaps measuring something, but they really quite weren't sure what to do or how to do it. It's all based on physics, but maybe you haven't got, maybe it is scalar waves. If it's scalar waves, then you're in a whole nother avenue of physics which are very controversial. Tesla was very, very much into those. The difficulty with Tesla is that when he passed away, J. Edgar Hoover came in and confiscated almost everything. When his maid discovered him dead, she didn't discover him dead. She discovered 5 FBI agents in his room pilfering everything, and he was laying on the bed dead. His nephew sued the U.S. government and won back, theoretically, all of his equipment, experiments, and records. There were theoretically 50 boxes. He got 45 of those in Belgrade. The other 5 are missing, and a whole bunch of stuff is missing. One of the guys did an experiment that he did in New Jersey, which was build a half-grounded antenna of a very unusual, different configuration. Everyone said it wouldn't work. But in 1934, he met one of Tesla's assistants who he worked with him in New Jersey, and he says, oh, well, you're hooking up wrong here, you hook it up like this. So in a rainstorm in Massachusetts, they hooked a little 10-watt receiver transmitter up, and the other guy went 50 miles away on the other side of a mountain, and in a rainstorm, they held a conversation over that antenna system without any noise, static, or anything else on it. We also found a record of a submarine that was in the Mediterranean in 1917, 1918, and Tesla in New Jersey put one of these antennas in the ocean, right off the coast and on the shore, and he's holding a conversation with the captain of the submarine. And one of the guys actually dug out of the Navy records the log of the submarine, and it essentially says, some idiot who's claiming he's in New Jersey talking to me must be absolutely crazy, because I know I'm 100 feet underwater and no one can be talking to me from New Jersey. And he had the matching language in his records, in his logbook, Tesla's logbook. So what was that? You know, people say, oh, it was an accident, it was a coincidence, it was an inversion of the what layer over here, you know. There are a lot of things we can't explain that people have actually done. Back when I was a young engineer at McDonnell in the 60s, we routinely designed for the Air Force and the Navy airplanes that flew at Mach 4.5 and 6. The Vietnam War interfered with most of that, but we had running engines that would fly Mach 6 easily. We actually had tested engines that would fly the Mach 12 airplanes. In fact, in 1966, a fellow by the name of Bill Escher, he's still alive working for SAIC in Huntsville, had on a test stand an engine that was, now we can't fly at Mach 8 in a wind tunnel, but we can duplicate the pressure and temperature that the engine would see if it were attached to an inlet, which is what he did. And he actually ran an engine that got within 5% of predicted performance of an airstream that duplicated Mach 8 conditions at about 120,000 feet, and it ran for about 20 minutes. That was all the air supply he had. 1966. And we were convinced we could build them then. What's fascinating is I got to see the X-33 a couple weeks ago, and they had this new breakthrough of this new shingle technology that allowed the inside of the airplane to be room temperature, cold, with these shingles that reflect the heat. They look exactly, now they're a little bit thinner because they have a little bit better materials, but we built exactly the same structure in '65 and tested it to Mach 12 conditions. Almost the same standoffs, a little bit more elegant than what we had because they have a little more elegant materials these days. But we were convinced we could do it then. People laugh at you and say, well, no, you couldn't, or no, it's impossible, we're not going to do that because it's risky. But no, it wasn't risky, and yes, it could be done. All it takes is a dreamer. So can you imagine the Wright brothers if one was a lawyer and one was an accountant? Why are you going to build a stupid airplane for? It only carries one person. Who's going to buy it? What kind of profit margin are we going to get? God, we got 40% on bicycles. Why are we doing this for? Think of the liability. Everybody can sue us. It's a bad idea. Yeah, let's not do it. As long as we have that opinion, we're stuck. What you have to say is, by gosh, it's something that no one's ever done before. Let's try it. Since my first introduction to UFOs as a young lieutenant to today, I would say you have to look at, first of all, I believe there's a large number of covert projects that go on in the United States that none of us are ever aware of. And if you see some of those things, they probably bend your mind and they don't fit your conception of what an airplane or whatever it is. And so it seems to you to be a UFO. So I think maybe a large fraction of those are covert projects that we're doing or someone's doing that are earthbound and human beings, and and if you really knew what was behind them, you would say, yes, I can see how that works. But then I think it's like Project Blue Book. There's this hardcore 10, 15% or 20% that don't fit any explanation other than the fact that the individuals, the beings that are in them and came here by way of a process that we're not familiar with.